In the late 1970s, the United States military faced a terrifying mathematical reality. Soviet radar technology had become so advanced that the traditional American strategy of high and fast was effectively dead. If a B-52 bomber tried to penetrate Soviet airspace, it would show up on a radar screen like a glowing lighthouse in a dark room. The Pentagon didn't need a faster plane. They needed a ghost. They needed something that could carry 40,000 pounds of nuclear ordnance through the most guarded airspace on Earth without ever being seen. The result was the B-2 Spirit, a project so secretive that even the people building it in high-security hangars in California didn't always know what the final product would look like. When the public finally saw it in 1988, it didn't look like an airplane. It looked like a boomerang from the year 3000. It had no tail, no vertical fins, and no 90-degree angles. To the human eye, it was a 172-foot monster. To a radar dish, it was a marble. But the B-2's invisible status came with a price tag that redefined the word expensive. At a final cost of roughly $2.1 billion per aircraft, each B-2 Spirit literally cost more than its own weight in solid gold. The American public was outraged, and Congress was baffled. How could a single plane cost as much as an entire fleet of fighter jets? The answer lay in the impossible engineering. Because the B-2 has no tail, it is aerodynamically unstable. In simple terms, it wants to crash. It shouldn't be able to fly. The only reason it stays in the air is because of a fly-by-wire computer system that makes thousands of tiny adjustments every second, adjustments no human pilot could ever hope to manage. If the computers fail, the $2 billion ghost becomes a $2 billion lawn dart. Then there was the skin. The B-2 is covered in a secret radar-absorbent material, or RAM, a chemical coating that swallows radar waves rather than reflecting them. This coating is so sensitive that it can be damaged by rain, heat, or even a scratch from a maintenance tool. To keep these ghosts invisible, the Air Force had to build specialized climate-controlled hangars worth millions of dollars just to keep the plane's skin from melting or losing its stealth properties. On its very first missions, the B-2 proved that the investment wasn't just about vanity, it was about total dominance. It could fly halfway across the world, drop its payload with surgical precision, and vanish back into the clouds before the enemy even knew the hangar doors were open. But as we're about to see in Part 2, being invisible isn't just about the shape of the wing. It's a brutal game of hide-and-seek against the laws of heat. To understand how the B-2 Spirit works, you have to realize that radar is essentially a flashlight in a dark room. When a radar dish sends out a signal, it's looking for a flat surface to bounce that signal back to its eyes. Standard bombers are flying mirrors covered in vertical tails, flat cockpit windows, and circular engine intakes that scream, "Here I am." The B-2 was designed to be a room made of tilted black glass. The geometry of the aircraft is entirely planform aligned. This means that every leading edge and every trailing edge is set at the exact same angle. When a radar pulse hits the B-2, it isn't reflected back to the source. It is deflected away at a sharp angle into the empty sky. This is how a 172-foot monster with a massive payload achieves a radar cross-section, or RCS, the size of a marble. But hiding from radar is only half the battle. In the modern age, seeing isn't just about radio waves, it's about heat. A jet engine is effectively a massive blowtorch reaching temperatures of over 1,500 degrees Celsius.
To an infrared sensor or a heat-seeking missile, a standard jet looks like a glowing flare against a black background. The B-2 solves this with a piece of engineering genius called the S-Duct intake. Instead of hanging under the wings, the engines are buried deep inside the fuselage. The air enters through scalloped intakes on the top of the wing, traveling through a curved S-shaped tunnel. This curve ensures that the glowing, white-hot fan blades of the engine are never visible from the ground. By the time the exhaust exits the plane, it is mixed with cool air and flattened out through V-shaped beaver tail troughs at the rear. This spreads the thermal signature so thinly that the heat dissipates into the atmosphere almost instantly. The B-2 doesn't just hide from the enemy's ears, it hides from their sense of touch. Yet this invisibility is incredibly fragile. The B-2 is covered in a secret radar-absorbent material, a chemical skin that actually swallows radar energy and converts it into heat. But this skin is temperamental. Even a gap the width of a credit card between two panels can create a radar spike that gives the ghost away. Ground crews spend hundreds of hours on tape and gap maintenance, using specialized stealth tape and conductive caulk to ensure the aircraft remains a single, seamless organic shape. This is why the B-2 is the most pampered aircraft in history. It cannot sit outside in the rain. It cannot stay in a hangar that isn't climate controlled. For every single hour the B-2 spends in the air, it requires up to 60 hours of specialized maintenance on the ground. It is a $2 billion glass cannon, nearly invincible in the sky, but a high-maintenance prisoner of its own technology. But the ultimate test of the B-2 isn't the science, it's the human endurance. In Part 3, we're going inside the cockpit to see what it's like to fly a 40-hour mission where you can't even stand up straight, carrying enough firepower to end a civilization.
The B-2 Spirit is a masterpiece of technology, but it is also a prison for the two humans tasked with flying it. Unlike a traditional bomber that might be stationed at a forward base near the conflict, the B-2 almost always operates from a single location, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Because of its sensitive stealth skin and the massive security footprint required to protect it, the B-2 doesn't go to the war, it brings the war to the enemy from half a world away. This leads to some of the most grueling missions in the history of aviation. A typical combat sortie for a B-2 crew can last anywhere from 30 to over 40 hours. Imagine sitting in a cockpit no larger than a walk-in closet, strapped into an ejection seat for 2 days straight. There are no beds, no kitchen, and the toilet is a small stainless steel container behind the seats. To stay sane, one pilot sleeps on a small cot on the floor, while the other monitors the Ghost's complex flight computers. They eat lukewarm mermite meals and drink endless amounts of coffee, all while navigating through pitch-black skies, refueling from tankers over the middle of the ocean, and preparing to strike targets with GPS-guided precision. The psychological toll is immense. These pilots aren't just flying a plane, they are managing a $2 billion national asset. If they make a single mistake during a mid-air refueling in a storm, they don't just lose a jet, they lose a significant percentage of the United States' strategic nuclear deterrent. It is a high-stakes game of endurance, where the enemy isn't just enemy radar, but sleep deprivation and human error. But as we move deeper into the 21st century, the B-2's reign as the ultimate ghost is reaching its twilight. Modern anti-access area denial systems, like the Russian S-400 and Chinese multi-static radars, are beginning to find ways to see the B-2's silhouette. The marble is starting to look more like a bird, and for a stealth bomber, being kind of visible is the same as being dead.
This is why the Air Force is already preparing for the next chapter, the B-21 Raider. The Raider is the B-2's younger, smarter, and lethal brother. It takes everything learned from the Spirit, the S-Ducts, the flying wing, the skin technology, and shrinks it into a platform that is easier to maintain and even harder to detect. While the B-2 was a product of the Cold War, built to end World War III, the B-21 is built for a digital age where the shadows are getting smaller. The B-2 Spirit will eventually retire to the desert or the museums, leaving behind a legacy as the most ambitious engineering project of the 20th century. It proved that we could make the massive invisible, that we could turn a 172-foot wing into a ghost, and that if you have enough gold and enough secrets, you can truly bribe the laws of physics. The ghost of Missouri may one day stop flying, but its shadow will hang over military aviation forever.